Terrorism is a known term in Cuba. This country has suffered attacks from the extremist right-wing Cuban American living in the United States. That's why people like the Cuban Five were in Miami to gather information and prevent terrorist attacks. We are in 23rd Avenue, one of the most centric streets here in Havana. These five faces can be found everywhere. The Cuban Five are symbols of patriotism, but also victims of the hate that remains in the United States towards Cuba. Their case is the proof that the intentions of destroying the Cuban Revolution are intact. We had the chance to talk to René González, one of the Cuban Five that finished his sentence. He was born in the United States, but came here when he was 5. He was recruited to gather information about terrorism against Cuba. Now, he and the other 4 are considered heroes. So let's talk about something that I've been wondering about for years, because my generation, in a way, grew up with your fight. What did you miss the most when you were in prison about your life here in Cuba?
Well, I missed, of course, my family. Having my family together with me, seeing my daughters growing up without her father. Don't forget that I had to be about 8 years before I could see Yvette again. So it's difficult to deal with that.
You saw her like a baby and then like a growing child.
Yeah, she was 4 months old when I was arrested. And then the prosecutors imposed limitations in my family rights. So the next time I saw her, she was already a year old. And then I could see her, once in a while for about 2 or 3 times before she came back to Cuba. She was 2 at the time when she came to Cuba. And then she was 8 years old when I was able to see her again.
And besides your family, what else did you miss about Cuba?
Everything. I missed the Cuban society, my life in Cuba. Of course, the freedom of being here. And I missed being part of the Cuban changes and the Cuban politics and the Cuban social life, because I believe it's a very important moment now. So we had to leave all of that through the information that we received from the embassy and from the families, and it's not always the same.
But did you think it was worth it, your years in prison, even though you had to leave your family?
Yeah, I believe so. I have no remorse. We have a strong sense of duty, and it grows up when you are in jail. So, you have to pay the price for doing the right thing sometimes. Unfortunately, the world is not fair. It is like it is. And it was a price that we had to pay for that. But I never had any hesitation at all or any remorse. And I believe it was worth it. We took the time to grow as human beings, to become better persons. And I believe we achieved that. And I'm fine with it.
How did you feel when you came back? That first moment in which you saw Cuba for the first time in 15 years?
Well, for me, it was strange, because it was as if I had left a few days ago before. I mean, it was like when I came here and I saw Cuba, I realized that this is the place where I belong to. Interestingly enough, when I left Cuba, I stole a plane, and I left the Cuban shoreline on the Santa Cruz del Norte. And the last thing I saw in Cuba was the smoke tower of the thermoelectric plant in Santa Cruz. And it was a coincidence, but when I came back, the first thing I saw in Havana was that plant. I was coming from Bahamas, on Cuban Airline. And I saw that plant, the same place that I have seen the last time when I left. And then I landed here. Of course, I saw my family, and it was like we'd been separated for just a little while. So as I told you, I missed everything. I missed my family. I missed my wife's coffee, so I can invite you for one now.
Okay, I would love that too. Thank you. Okay, let's go.
Cuando estaba en la libertad supervisada, Olguita me decía por el
Eso es
Skype.
un intento, ¿no?
Ella me decía por Skype, échale tal cosa, échale tal cosa.
His family suffered the distance, and even Olga, his wife, was in prison for some time. Their two daughters grew up without a father. His coming back is a reconstruction of his family, but also a renewed hope in the possibility of seeing the other three free. You were talking about your family. How did you miss your family when you were in prison? What could take a person to make this kind of sacrifice for your own life and for your family?
Well, as a matter of fact, although I'm sacrificing, you can say that I'm sacrificing for the whole society, but I can't forget that my family is part of that society. I'm firmly convinced that this is the place where I want my children and the children of my children to grow up. And I want to see this society evolve and become better, but I want them to grow up in this society. So in some way, when I sacrificed for the whole of the Cuban society, I'm also thinking of them, because this is the place where they are going to grow up and when they're going to develop as human beings. So for me, there is no contradiction at all. I mean, the motherland is my family, is my friends, is the people of Cuba. So I didn't see any contradiction at all since the beginning.
There's a tendency in the international press that used to say that the Cuban Five were spies. I mean, generally when you look it up on the web, that's what it said. Were you spies?
Well, spy is a generic word. It's a verb. It describes an action. So if you use it lightly, you can say, well, I don't know, if I look through the window to my neighbor, I'm spying on him. But here we are talking about a legal case. We are talking about a legal process where the law was applied to us incorrectly. So that's when the use of the general term contradicts what happens on the trial. Spying, legally speaking, means that you are trying to seek protected information from another country, from another government, and that's the point of rupture between the general use of the term and what we were doing there. And it's important because it means life sentences, and it means 20, 30-year sentences. So you have to clarify that whenever you talk to people about the case. We never were looking for any information that was protected by the United States government. We were not interested in it. We never tried to obtain it. So that's why we always challenge the use of the word spy, because legally speaking, we were not committing espionage.
So why were you and the other four, which make the case of the five, why were you in Miami?
Well, I grew up in Cuba. I came here from the United States when I was 5. And my whole generation witnessed how Cubans were being killed and hurt by violent activities committed from people coming from Miami. And that was my main motivation. We have to bury the victims of the Cuban airliner which was blown up in 1976. And the guy who made that possible is still living in Miami. And everybody here is a terrorist. And everybody here knows that they have training camps in Miami, that they announce those training camps. They have offices open where they advocate terrorism against Cuba. We even know that they have Congress people there who in the Capitol, they advocate for the killing of Cuban leaders. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I mean, if you are a patriot and you're asked to protect the life of your people from things like that, you just say yes, and that's what I did.
Since you came here, you've been working for this, for the other 4, and now the other 3, because Fernando is here too. And one of the main actions it was a campaign of wearing or of one day a yellow ribbon or a yellow cloth in general, which was very well received by the Cuban people. It's an example. Even had a son. It was a very interesting campaign, which uses a cultural motive from United States. What else has been doing in order to get the other three back here?
Well, to start with, one of the concepts behind the whole process against us is that, from the point of view of the prosecutors, as human beings, the Cubans here have less value than the Americans. Unfortunately, that's their point of view. And we wanted to convey to the US people precisely the opposite, that we are as humans as they are, that we have family like they have, and that the Cuban people expect is 5 sons, like any family expects somebody coming from jail. So usually, basically, that's the point I try to make anytime I try to mobilize or to have some ideas, to expose some ideas in the work for the fight. We're trying to take the message to Washington that the Cuban people as a whole see the 5 as their own sons, as their own brothers, as their own fathers. And that's basically what we're working on. We had recently the journey, 5 Day for the 5, where people went to Washington and defended the 5 over there in the White House and Congress. And most of the things that I'm trying to do is to focus on Washington, all the potential that we've created during those years for solidarity with the 5.
What do you think it should change or mass change in United States, in Washington, D.C. specifically, in order to solve this case?
Well, I believe things are changing in the right direction.
Are you optimistic right now about it?
I'm lightly optimistic. I believe that the whole scheme of relations with Cuba is exhausted. And I believe that maybe for the first time, the American society and the factors that lead on the American society are realizing that. The blockade is under fire because they realize that they are missing the opportunity to be here now when we are doing some changes which they could take advantage of. And the whole discourse against Cuba is starting to change, I would say, at a fast pace. And I believe that's what it takes. It takes for them to realize that they are losing more than they are winning by keeping this policy against Cuba. And I hope that soon they realize that they better deal with Cuba as a neighbor, as a friend, and change that dynamic against Cuba, which is already exhausted and it's been in place for too long, for 55 years.
Could you describe why was it an unfair trial?
Well, it's not only me, and it's good that the people know that, because most of the information about the trial is unknown for the American people and from the masses. It was the United Nations Group on Arbitrary Detentions, the one who ruled that a trial had been arbitrary and didn't comply with the Constitution of the U.S. It's Amnesty International also the one who is saying that after having reviewed the whole record of the trial. But our trial was a political trial where the 3 powers, supposedly independence of the states, combined to deny us our right to a fair trial based upon the 6th amendment of the Constitution. I would say that the most egregious violation of the Constitution was to hold the trial in Miami. It was just a common sense that Miami wasn't a place for us to have a fair trial. Upon that based violation of denying us a change of venue, which everybody would have agreed was absurd to keep the trial in Miami, they piled up violations after violations. We recently knew that they had paid journalists who were covering the trial probably more than $1 million, so they could poison the atmosphere of Miami, where the jury was selected. Of course, at the time of the trial, we didn't know about that. We know that they put us in the hole for a year and a half, and then they put the evidence in a different place, I would say in another hole, so we couldn't have access to the evidence to prepare for the trial with our lawyers. And all of that was acknowledged by, as I told you, Amnesty International, the Human Rights Commissions of the United Nations. So, I mean, it's not only me. Everybody agrees. Nobel Peace Prizes, parliamentarians all over the world, personalities, politicians, international organizations of lawyers, that the trial was unfair and that they violated the Sixth Amendment for a fair trial.
Rene, there's been other cases that, in a way, some analysts have made like a parallel with your case. 1979, two unilateral actions, one from Cuba that released CIA agents, and United States Puerto Ricans that Cuba had been interested in helping them in order to be free. Recently, Taliban's and the soldier Bo was released too, in a case that some people find similarities. And right now the case of Alan Gross, which was a contractor from USAID who was working undercover here in Cuba. That's in a way, some people make comparisons about this case and the possibility that could be solved in the same way. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's up to Obama to make that decision, but I believe it can be done. And all it takes from him is to summon up the courage to do it and to take the risk, which in my opinion are not so difficult. I mean, if you look at the deal done with the Taliban, that's a real risk. That's what Hillary would say, would call a hard choice, a really hard choice. In this case, we have 3 Cubans who didn't do any damage to the United States, who weren't committed to commit any act of violence against the United States, who were only defending Cuba from actions coming from the United States against Cuba. And of course, my 3 comrades in prison, they don't represent any danger in the future for the US at all, contrary to what you would expect from the Taliban, which are still in war with the US. So I believe it can be done. A lot of people in the United States are realizing that, the absurdity of keeping Alan Gross here when the solution is in the hands of the White House. And I expect that Obama makes the right assessment of risk and benefits and realizes that that's the right thing to do. I don't have any grudge against Alan Gross. He committed a crime here. He's in prison. I know that he's judged. So I wish him, the best to go with his family, but we cannot expect that Cuba is going to make a unilateral gesture when the United States doesn't do the same. So I believe that the government should sit and talk about not only these issues, but the rest of the issues that divide us.
What's the situation of the other 3? Ramon, Gerardo, Anthony, that remains there. How many years are left in order
for
them
Antonio
to
is
come
supposed
back?
to get off of jail on 2017, and Ramon would finish his sentence in 2024, which by coincidence is the same time when Alan Gross would get out of jail. So if you look at it, what we are looking now is some people, I believe is a minority in the U.S. establishment, who are bent on a vengeance against the 5, and at the end they have to decide whether it is worth to keep Alan Gross here until 2024 just for the sake of keeping Gerardo in jail until he dies for a crime he didn't commit. And it's important that everybody knows that the prosecutors knew that he didn't commit that crime. So I hope again that the U.S. government do the right thing and they put an end to this sooner than 2024 or 2017.
Right now there's a midterm election this year, and afterwards it's supposed to, 2016, presidential election. So it's very important what the public opinion should know about this. I've read something you said sometimes, and you said, why am I innocent? Because no country should punish to the sons of other country for the same reasons that would make heroes the sons of their own. You've lived in the United States for almost 30 years in different situations. You were born there. Do you believe that if the public opinion in the United States knew the case, this would be easier?
Well, it's not only me. I mean, the U.S. government also believes that. And that's the reason why the U.S. press didn't cover the case. I mean, they knew that by putting us on trial for those charges, they were committing a crime, and they decided that the U.S. people shouldn't know about the case. And when you look at this case, this is a case that everybody there should have known about. I mean, everybody knows that in the U.S. society, there is always a couple of legal cases which are making the news to keep people busy, entertained with the, I don't know, a wife who cut his husband's head, or somebody who adopted somebody else. And then you have this trial, which is the longest trial in the U.S. history, which deals with terrorism, which deals with espionage, supposedly, which deals with a murder incident in international waters, supposedly, according to the prosecutors, with witnesses who go from a presidential advisor to 3 generals who testify for the defense without receiving any payment. And the U.S. people didn't know about that. No press was interested in covering that trial. It's absurd. And the only reason is that they knew that if they had covered that trial, and if the U.S. people had known about this case, not only the case of the 5, the whole legal system in the U.S., the federal legal system, would have been in question in front of the whole U.S. society. So I believe it is important that the U.S. people know about the case.
Let's talk about a different topic, not about the case. Here in Cuba, there's a perception, not only a perception, an idea that you, the 5, are the modern heroes. For the youngest people in Cuba, you are the proof that the intentions of destroying the Cuban Revolution remains intact. Those intentions after 55 years of revolution. How do you feel about this trust that people in Cuba have towards you, the 5?
Well, maybe it's a little bit excessive, in the sense
you're being modest.
No, in the sense that there is a lot of Cubans who would have done the same thing that we did. I would say millions of Cubans would have done that. So I'm just one of them, and the 5, we are just 5 of them. So there is a little bit of luck in this. It was us, but I'm sure that a lot of people in Cuba would have done the same, and they would have defended not only Cuba through the trial, but even our own human dignity, which was a target on the trial. That said, I believe that, being considered a hero by the Cubans, I mean, for me, it's just a compromise. It's a condition that you can lose if you don't do the right things in the future. So you have to be very mindful of that. You have to be aware that for people you represent a paradigm that you have to defend, that you have to keep high, and well, that's what I plan to do.
It's like a responsibility.
Well, it is. It's a compromise. It's a responsibility. It's a condition that demands from you high standards in your daily life, and I don't forget that.
You're now working a lot in order to free the other 3, but after that, we all hope that they will be freed soon. What would you like to do?
I'll never give up on flying. That's my vocation. I love aviation, and I'll be happy to fly in any condition, even voluntary. I don't know, but I love flying. And on the other hand, I'm a Cuban revolutionary. I believe we are living very interesting times in Cuba, which I believe is a time which is worth living in Cuba now. So I'll do whatever I need to do to be part of it, to put my efforts into helping my country to become a better place, a better society, and to build the socialism that we have always dreamed and deserved. And I want to be part of that.
Thank you very much, Rene. It's been such a pleasure to hear a hero and a pilot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.